You know, a lot of folks don't know I was an Augustinian seminarian for 3 years of my life, wore the habit of the order for a brief time. And for me, to know that, and I had just been reading about him in one of the Augustinian magazines that goes around. They did a profile on him and talking about him. And so that moment was like, wow, that connection to the order and to the narrative of St. Augustine, who was a badass. You know, he was just a bad boy. I mean, he was of the world in so many ways. And so now you have the Vicar of Christ, who is also in continuation of that legacy of both Augustine and Francis, of bringing the message of Christ directly to people. So that, for me, was a very powerful moment, watching him there with that smile, but then starting with the words, you know, peace to all of us, which was just kind of a wonderful thing.
And there were so many special moments, as you said. You couldn't help but think of St. Augustine. You couldn't help but think of the late Pope Francis. But with his name, of course, you couldn't help but think of Pope Leo, which is another beautiful theme today. Yeah. Pope Leo is, of course, the founder of kind of Catholic social thought, and gave us the famous encyclical Rerum Novarum, which really advocated for workers and just working conditions, and was both critical of socialism but also laissez-faire capitalism. So it's really a kind of nod to, in a time of really socioeconomic inequality around the world, finding a way to kind of come together around common morals to support those on the margins of society.
Yeah. 7 months before Pope Leo became Pope Leo, he was a cardinal prevost. And in English, he talked about what a bishop is called to do at the time. Again, this is 7 months before becoming the Pope. I don't know if we have the video or I can read the audio. I'm going to read it. Oh, we have it. Okay, let's play it.
Is not supposed to be a little prince sitting in his kingdom, but rather called authentically to be humble, to be close to the people he serves, to walk with them, to suffer with them, and to look for ways that he can better live the gospel message in the midst of his people.
That was then Cardinal Prevost. And now, today, newly elected Pope Leo, he called on Catholics to be a missionary church that receives everyone. Take a listen.
We've got to look at how we can together be a missionary church, a church that builds bridges, that is always open to receive everyone, just like in this square, to receive everyone, to welcome everyone, our charity, our dialogue and love.
First, a Pope fluent in all the languages, but also, I mean, the roots of the church, a missionary church. What did you take from his comments 7 months before, juxtaposed with what he said today?
Well, let's talk about what we just saw and what he said, because I think both are important here. You hear him talking in this way that's very resonant of Francis. Pope Francis talked about how the church needed to be a church that was a missionary field hospital church, one that was actually amongst the people. So when he stepped out today on that loggia, you kind of heard the remnants of Pope Francis. But if you look at him and what he's wearing right there, it's kind of reminiscent of Benedict. That's a very similar, the mozzetta, the kind of red draping around, was similar to what Pope Benedict walked out on. So I think that sends a couple interesting signals about this papacy. On one hand, I think that he will keep up the tenor and tone that was very reminiscent of Francis, but I think the look and feel of it will have pieces that remind you of Pope Benedict. This Pope is someone who really understands the Curia, or the folks who kind of run the church. He's an institutionalist in a way that Pope Francis certainly wasn't. So in many ways, this is the best of both worlds. Everybody who's looking for something can find it in this Pope.
When we were in the run-up to the conclave, I read a piece by a Catholic editor who said, like, this isn't the Iowa caucuses. Like, they're not getting up and giving being on the stump, and yet it is inherently political, both the process that happens internally and the backdrop it is set against.
Well, one of the things that can kill you in this is if you're seen as campaigning for it, that really hurts you. And on top of that, one of the things when you're seen as the front runner, there can come out criticisms or critiques that might hurt you when you ultimately go into conclave. So that critical week in between is really important to follow. I think that in the last few days, you've kind of started hearing his name, but he was certainly not on the short list that we were talking about a week ago.
No, he wasn't on the short list, and I think that that's what's so profoundly important about his election. Was, again, like Francis, who was not on anyone's list. The cardinals, as Catholics believe, through the Holy Spirit, with them, saw the need of the church. And you talked about institutionalism. I was noted something from the National Catholic Reporter, which you write for from time to time. In February, he shared a post, the Pope, then Cardinal, from the media outlet National Catholic Reporter, repeating the headline, J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask to rank our love for others, in which a writer rebuts the vice president's claim in a Fox News interview that Christians prioritize loving people close to them before those from other countries. You have this Pope who, as a cardinal, was not afraid to push back up against the things that, as a Catholic, we should know better, JD, and as I guess where the politics of the world is, not just the U.S., but where the politics of the world is, always mindful of that you can't put a price, a label, or a priority on love. And that's, I think, it's going to be interesting to watch how he translates that into other aspects on issues like immigration, how we treat the migrant, how we feed the poor, how we take care of those who are dispossessed. How do you see this papacy standing up politically in this global space?
Well, the cardinals certainly took the same approach to carrying out the legacy of Pope Francis in this way. I suspect that this will be a pope who is a pastor first. So rather than starting from a place of criticism, I think he will aim to start from a place of inclusion. Politically, I think that there are a lot of people today who are trying to jump in and say, well, he criticized J.D. Vance, therefore he must be a liberal. But the important thing to remember is that the Catholic Church's ideology doesn't fit neatly into any political box. So yes, he was critical of J.D. Vance on issues like immigration. But I suspect that in time, issues that are typically seen as progressive or democratic, such as abortion, you will see them carry out the teachings of the church there. So, a pope is there to carry out the full breadth of Catholic social teaching. The thing that Pope Francis was so good about, that I suspect Pope Leo will be very good at too, is reorienting towards the times, talking about social inequality, talking about things like climate change, talking about things like immigration. And in a church that is global, and is the church both for America, but for Africa and Latin America and Asia, that will be an important message that needs to cross all of those societies.